Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Yu Yu Hakusho Season 1, Episode 4. Great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So we're picking up in the aftermath of last episode. The squad's on their way to an island. Because I was like, did they have to go to an island to go against Toguro? Because I definitely remember, because I remember them having to take a boat to go to the Dark Tournament, but I didn't remember the fight against Toguro being a boat trip too. But I was like, I didn't think about that last episode, but I was like, look at God. Just further reminder just how much I don't remember. I keep bringing it up all the time, and I know you're so, probably sick of me saying that, but I'm just it feels like some stuff is on the tip of my tongue, and I just feel like I'd have some vague memories. I'd probably be better off if I remember nothing at all, because you wouldn't have to hear me say that over and over again, but regardless, they get to the island, and the group ends up splitting out. First and foremost, it's Hiei deciding to go off on his own, because he's like, right, we go our separate ways from here. Yusuke and Kuwabara go off on their own after Kurama decides to stay behind to deal with this last guy. That guy's circumstances, the dude who makes those invisible energy balls that explode, I was trying to remember what it was. I was like, there's some anime I was thinking about when he had the whole battlefield surrounded. I was like, oh, it kind of reminds me of Piccolo's Hell Zone grenades. It kind of reminds me of that, just invisible, because Piccolo's Hell Zone grenades aren't invisible, but him shooting them all over the place. And I think for the sake of the show, they make them at least somewhat visible by giving them this kind of shimmer to them, design wise, but they are completely invisible. I think even Kurama can't even see them. But this is our first time really getting to see Kurama cut loose, because we've only seen a tiny bit of him fighting, especially with the whip, but now it's him going full front. That move where he's just twisting, kind of almost breakdancing on the ground, spinning on one hand while the whip's spinning around. I'm like, oh, that's so sick. There's an elegance and beauty to the way that Kurama fights, and that's also why this guy likes Kurama, because first he's like, oh, your hair. He's like, oh, I want to kill you because you're such a beautiful thing. I kind of want to capture your beauty. He's obsessed with it. But even though Kurama's got the length as well, they're fighting both kind of at I'd say he probably has Kurama when it comes to range, because he probably can go a lot further range, because yes, the whips have long range to them, but it's still probably mid range to them. I also like how he utilizes him grappling hooks during this fight, how he's bouncing around, kind of swinging around on them, and how he utilizes them for the mobility of it all, not only just for attacking. But it's this guy's keep away game is tough, because he's not only able to shoot these orbs at you, they explode and you can't quite see them, and then he eventually riddles the battlefield with them, which I love. That it's right, when is our boy going to pull out the rose? And he pulls out two. I love that whole thing of just having the petals explode, and they just they end up spreading across the battlefield and end up taking on the explosion. So I figured that was going to come back into play. I figured that had to be his final move. The fact is that he threw the rose and home dude blocked it. I was like, that's going to be a fatal mistake. I figured that was going to be the killing blow situation. But Kurama was put into a position where he ends up having to go into his full yokai form. He's like, right, this is a battle my human body is too slow for. It's too heavy for. Because, like I said, I remembered a little bit about Kurama's full true form, but I don't remember the full circumstances of it, because they don't really go over it in the episode, because he doesn't stay in the form the entire time, because eventually I think it's, as the guy says, oh, you ran out of supernatural energies, because he can't even summon up the whips anymore. So it's either just a thing of his natural reserve of energy is not what it used to be, because he still hasn't fully recovered from the circumstances that he was running from that made him, be kind of born as a human in this world. Well, born into a human body in this world. So I think maybe that is the reason why, maybe his reserves weren't, because he also hasn't probably gone in I think he even implies, he hasn't used his yokai form, his full yokai form since he retreated into like a human fertilized egg and kind of was born into a human body. He hasn't gone full yokai since then. So maybe it just probably had, even over all these years, he still probably hasn't built up of enough of a reserve to be. What also surprised me is when he was still using the plants. I was like, I mean, it makes sense. It's like plants are Kurama's thing, but I didn't remember plants still be associated with his yokai form, his full yokai form. I felt like there was something different, but I'm also trying to remember, like, did he not finish this fight in his yokai form? Because I do vaguely feel like I remember Kurama going in his yokai form for this particular fight. Because, once again, I get these vague memories of, I feel like I remember this guy and the guy he ended up fighting. I remember them vaguely, but... Because it seems like the thing of like, okay, let's showcase what Kurama can do, and let's have him in the fight. That seems like the traditional fashion, but for them to have him revert back to human, like, revert back because his form ran out, I'm like, I feel like, that's why I feel like my explanation of why he turned back into his normal form, it feels like that might have been the rationalization in the anime. I mean, maybe that's just my own, from experience of manga and anime and just, you know, superpowered stuff being like, oh, that's the justification for it. Maybe I created my own justification, or maybe that's specifically what happened in the anime too. I don't know. But like I said, because typically in a situation like this, the go-to thing would be like, no, he ends up beating this battle in this full yokai form. But he ends up surviving it because he ends up planting a death seed inside of the guy, and it grows the entire time, going throughout his body, wrapping around his heart. I love that he was like, oh, I'm glad that you are... What was the exact phrasing he used? He was like, I'm glad you're heartless because I can be cruel too without hesitation. And he ends up activating the plant, and it just like they explode from his body, and crushed his heart, and then they start exploding from all over his body because the roots are just like spreading throughout even his bloodstream. And yeah, he was talking about keeping Kurama's head intact because it's like, oh, that way I get to keep it in its beautiful state. And it's like, yeah, Kurama gave you a very beautiful death in a lot of ways. So there's that fight. There's a whole situation with Hiei's fight against the armored dude who's pretty quick on his feet and pretty tough, that Hiei had to push himself to go all out in this battle. Once again, just love how that whole sequence plays out. Like I said, I just cannot gush about it enough. I'm like, I love the choreography. Because I can't, like, next to One Piece, and even then, this guy, because you get a lot of superpowered stuff, so it's not as, like, melee focused as some of the fights have been in this series. So it's a different beast. But it's like, the last, obviously prior to One Piece, I don't remember the last, and I think the North American Death Note adaptation was like the last live action anime adaptation I saw. Well, manga / anime. Nope. Alice in Borderland. It's because it's based on a manga. I forgot about that. No. Yeah, prior to One Piece, yes, but more recently it was like Sweet Home is the most recent thing I've saw, but it's not a, like, because I haven't watched anything that's so actiony based. Like, there's things with action sequences, but like I said, it's just like, this is a whole other beast. I feel like with just how the choreography is handled for these fights. I'm like, oh, it's so dope, because it's like, I don't remember early Yu Yu Hakusho fights being as like dynamic as it, and they probably weren't. I'm just, like I said, I just don't remember. I mean, you're also talking about animation in the 90s versus, like, what animation would be today. Like, I even said in a previous episode, like, how this would be stylized present day is so different. I'm sure even how it's stylized in a manga would be different with, like, you know, the way things are done action-wise now in, like, a manga or an anime, so. But just, like, the swiftness of, like, Hiei and Armored Dude's fight, just them all over the place, and just, even though, like, I'm cute. Just from a technical standpoint, I'm like, you can only assume that the actual axe part of the axe is like got to be CGI. Like the staff part of the axe is probably real, and that either they are, and they like, either it's smaller and like digitally affected by CGI, but I'm like, I can only assume the head of that axe being as massive as it is, like I'd assume that, I mean, it could always be like made of foam or something like that, so it might not be that out of pocket, but I would just under the assumption, I would assume like, is that whole thing with CGI? Because it looks so realistic. Like I'm sure like if you have a keener eye for this, I don't have a keen eye for that stuff and stuff, but I'm like, I'd assume that whole like blade part of the axe would be CGI, but I mean maybe it's actually real in regards of it's maybe it's made of foam and they make it look more realistic with CGI or something like that, or maybe that axe head doesn't exist at all and it's pure CGI. It's not even CGI on top of something. I don't know. I'm curious to know how they did that, because that'd be a hell of a thing just to kind of swing around, even in a more it's not real, it's very light sense. It still feels like it'd be, I don't know. Once again, I'm not technically savvy enough of like VFX to really note what's like what part of that was like real and what's like added CGI versus being entirely CGI with that axe thing. But it wasn't just led to a whole dope sequence of how that whole situation plays out. Home dude kind of does the whole thing of like, yeah, like Hiei starts landing blows and starts cracking his armor. So it's like, cool, I'm gonna have to go all out. He drops off his armor, which is very much in that Dragon Ball Z thing of like, ooh, it's weighing like a ton, and every piece he's taking off is weighing a crap ton, and he's able to kind of shoot out these like blows of darkness. So Hiei has no choice but to go all out. And I was like, what was Hiei's circumstances again? And then as he unwraps his right arm, the dragon comes out. I was like, that feels slightly familiar. I loved how that thing just like whipped across the entire battlefield, grabbing the guy and like dragging him and smashing him everywhere, and then finally like smashing him into the ground, like burned his body up. And he's even asking Hiei, it's like, right, I lost to Toguro and then I lost to you, so my shame as a warrior, you have to kill me. Because I guess maybe Toguro kept him alive, but it's like, right, I've lost once, I can live with, I have shame, I gotta keep going until I'm able to beat Toguro, maybe that's the thing. But now he's lost to another person, so it's like, I need to die. But Hiei's like, yeah, you want to die, go ahead, but I'm not into the I don't do stuff that people tell me to do, so just kind of leaves him and goes on his way. And I love when him and Kurama meet up, both of them heavily injured, and you can tell like they like both of them try to be like, nah, I'm good. It's like, oh, you probably can't use your right arm anymore. It's like, I'll keep going. And Kurama, you can say he was limping, and he kind of like starts running after Hiei when like Hiei takes over. So like it seems like they kind of got a little of that competitive spirit like Yusuke and Kuwabara, where it's like, no, I'm good, I can keep going, because like both of you got pretty jacked up in you. I mean, granted, I'd say Kurama is worse off in some capacities, but Hiei is in others, considering like, well, his arm is jacked to shit because of using his power. Because at the same time this was all going down, Sakyo was leading this whole betting situation, because he was talking to, Tarukune about stuff, and he was making this whole point about bets, how he never loses one, never lost one, and he even brought up the fact is that sometimes instead of betting chips, he bets lives. He's only done it 4 times, because the other times he's done it, people kind of backed out because they found out how serious he is. So he does kind of the Russian roulette and spins the chamber, and click, nothing happens. So guys, obviously heavily unhinged, but it's just that rich and powerful thing of, oh, I'm so bored, aren't we bored of all of this? So trying to find some excitement. That's what he's seeking with the like portal to the demon world. And I guess that's also like, once you're rich and powerful, like you need something more to get your rocks off. That's why all these rich people are making bets on the battle, and that's why they all ended up losing massive amounts of money, because Kurama and Hiei came out victorious. We also got the confirmation that I was right last episode, thinking that the small guy, the small brother, is actually the older brother. Maybe on some level I remember that to some vague notion. Why I would even consider that immediately? Like I said, I thought just like, I think it's meant to just be the opposites of, oh, because he's a smaller brother, for him to actually be the older brother, and the big brother to actually be the younger brother. I just felt like that'd be just poetic, like just. But maybe, like I said, maybe it scratched some like Yu Hakusho memory where I remember that was the case. But yeah, I just thought that was interesting. We also get the confirmation that Genkai is dead, but I'm like, there's no way she's like dead, right? It's like, no way, because she's too associated with other stuff that I'm like, I was like, there's no, did they, I was like, that's it. That's an interesting choice. Cause I'm like, I don't, cause I feel like stuff with Genkai doesn't happen until later that she's, but that's why I'm like, is she fake dead? Do they think she's dead, but she's actually still alive? And also, Batan and Koema don't want to tell Yusuke. They want him to focus on what he's doing right now. They don't want him distracted with Genkai's death. I mean, especially because now Yusuke's going to realize like all the stuff she said to him. It's like she said all that knowing death was coming her way. The whole notion about passing it on to the next generation. Why she was adamant about giving him the Spear Wave Orb, which I completely forgot to talk about last episode. We have Keiko and Yukina, because I think I was calling her, what was it, Korime, I think. That was a name I kept seeing in some of the subtitles, so I'm like, that might have been like that. I was thinking that was her name, not unless that's someone else's name, but I was like, not unless that's the species of yokai that she is, or something like that, because I don't know. Like, I kept seeing the name Korime show up, but it always seemed like it was in association with her, so it might be the type of yokai she is, or what she's kind of based around, what, you know, the whole Tears of Ice that gets sold. Maybe that's someone else's name, but she's Yukina, and I mean, to be fair, her and Keiko were put in the cells side by side last episode, but Keiko wakes up and sees her, and it's like, wait, finds out a yokai kidnapped me. Wait, that's what's going on, and she ends up healing Keiko's wounds, and it's like, oh, you're a yokai too. But given the opportunity, using some of what Yusuke taught her to choke out one of the guards with a wrestling move, she ends up freeing her and Yukina, and she sees the wounds on her arms. Because obviously Yukina doesn't want to go. The last person that helped her ended up dying because of it. But it's like, right, you have to leave, especially for that person that sacrificed himself for you. Like, you have to get out of here, even more so for their sake. And she also sees the wounds on her arms from being shackled, and obviously what they've done to her to kind of get her to cry tears. So I love that they run into Kuwabara before they like fully run into Kuwabara, when they're hiding because they hear someone coming. I was like, oh, it's not going to be Yusuke, it's going to be Kuwabara. I was like, wait, Kuwabara and Yukina. And then the moment Keiko like punches him in the balls, and then he looks at Yukina and he's captivated, I was like, is that a thing? I was like, before they met, I was like, that feels like that's scratching another itch in my head too. I'm like, I feel like I might have remembered, like, at the very last second, I'm like, wait, does Kuwabara have a thing for Yukina? I don't know if it's like fully like she feels the same way. Like, I think she cares for Kuwabara, which obviously that's all going to turn into issues when it comes to Hiei. If I remember correctly, Kuwabara and Hiei butt heads pretty regularly. Like, once again, another like shonen comparison, be like, it's a little, I mean, because obviously you have like your rivals, like your Naruto's and your Sasuke's, but it's because obviously that's Yusuke and Kuwabara. Obviously this pre-existed Naruto in that capacity, but I'd also even say like, because I think Kuwabara and Hiei end up being like the Sanji and Zoro of this, if I remember correctly. I think they do bump heads the most, especially when Hiei's sister's involved, because he doesn't like that. So, because I think it's also like, you're a human, don't be getting all close to my sister. But yeah, like, he's so awestruck and in love, and I love that Keiko's looking like, what the hell is going on here? And later on, when they're getting chased by that yokai, he's like trying to protect Yukina, and like Keiko's there, he tries to get her out of the way. He doesn't push her out of the way with his hand, he kicks her out of the way to protect her. It's almost like, you're so much more gentle with Yukina, because it's like, I'm protecting you, Keiko, but like Yukina's like she's the most one in danger. So it actually kind of feels a little, it's weird to say Resident Evil-ish, the way they're getting away from the monster, where like they close the shutter and you have Kuwabara sliding underneath it. There's a little, I don't know if Resident Evil would be the right thing to say, but it has that vibe to it. It feels like kind of like a Resident Evil 4 sequence to me, for whatever reason. I'm saying this as someone who's not well versed in, Resident Evil. That's just not my franchise. I've watched people play it. I'm entertained by it, but like, it's not a franchise I'm like deep in the weeds when it comes to. So, but it just kind of reminded me of that. And of course, they're going to end up running into the older brother the older Toguro brother, which makes sense because I was like, I remember Kuwabara and him going toe to toe. So once again, just like how twisted and disgusting. Yeah, I was like, we see a little bit of it, but I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot just how disgusting his abilities are. They're like really, really disgusting because I remember it more so from the future, and I'm just like, ugh. But yeah, like that sequence of just him hitting him with the metal pipe and then his body like shifting and him moving his head to his stomach and then basically transferring his body so the piece that grabs the part of his body that's grabbing onto the pipe is his hand, and he takes his other hand and morphs it into an axe or a blade and trying to go after Kuwabara, whereas Yusuke finds himself in the center room going up against Toguro, who kind of says like, all right, so show me what she gave you, which Yusuke's like, wait, what do you mean by that? What are you trying to say? Once again, he still doesn't know about Genkai, but he'll probably find out during the fight, so. And then there's a reveal where Sakyo learns that the wormhole to the demon world is ready, and he's like madman laughing, ready for this. So obviously it all comes down to this for the final showdown. The next episode is the season finale, which once again I'm still awestruck by, because I think it's because I saw some places saying 6 episodes, so I was kind of like, wait, is there a missing episode? Not unless that got pushed to like a potential season 2, or maybe it was always supposed to be 5. They were very like, I saw nothing initially talking about how many episodes are actually going to be in this, because I don't think anyone really knew. But I'm before the next episode could pull up, because I always close out before the next episode automatically plays. But it says 1 more to go, so it's like there ain't no secret episode. It's just episode 5. So I thought that's so, once again, such an odd number of episodes, which is interesting. But I mean, we'll ultimately have to wait to see where this goes. Once again, I still say that being like, yeah, I might not remember everything, but I know the story beat points of next episode, how it all plays out and how that potentially ends and what that potentially could set up for, the future. But we'll talk about that more when we get to the season finale and just, discussing the season finale. But it's like that thing of, yeah, I know where it goes. I know the story beats. I won't remember every detail, but I remember the ends and the reveals at the very end. So this whole Sakyo storyline, I'm like, I don't remember where that goes. The Toguro stuff, I definitely remember. But the Sakyo thing of, like, your employee, I'm like, I don't... Maybe he was always significant, I just don't remember. Maybe that ties into future stuff that I'm also blanking on, but... Maybe he has something to do with the Dark Tournament. I don't remember Sakyo, but like I said, we'll find out more during the season finale. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.